morning, grade 4s. Today we're going to talk a little bit about decimal places and the place value system. So this might look a little bit familiar to you up to this point. It might look familiar at the back too. We don't remember how much we've done with this, but it is going to be fun nevertheless. So let's start with the ones that we probably know. We have the ones, we have the tens, we have the hundreds, and we have the thousands. So if you look at all of these places, they all represent different things. For example, 4 is equal to 1 whole, or 4 wholes. So there'd be 4 boxes that are worth wholes. The 3 here is equal to 3 tens, so that's like stacks of 10 wholes. And there's 3 stacks of 10 wholes. We go to the hundreds, we go to the thousands. As we go this way, our measurements get bigger, which means as we go this way, our measurements are always going to get smaller. Now on the other side of the decimal point, we have things that are worth less than a whole number. So this 5/10 here is worth less than a whole 1. So I've drawn a little picture to help us with that. If this is equal to 1 whole 1, 5/10 would be like covering in 5 sections of that 10 thing. It's like a little fraction, 5/10. Now as we get over here, we have the hundredths position, and that's like coloring in 6 hundredths, which would be just like that, super, super, super tiny. So you'll notice once again the tenths are bigger than the hundredths, even though 6 is bigger than the 5. And finally, when we get to the thousandths, we're dividing our whole number into 1,000 little pieces. So 7 thousandths would look like that, barely anything covered in because there's so many thousands. So again, the thousandths are smaller than the hundredths, even though the 7 is technically bigger than the 6. So as you keep on going, these measurements get smaller and smaller and smaller. And so what we're going to do is we're going to just do some comparison work today. I want to be able to name these types of decimals, and I want to be able to compare them to each other. So in this question, I am asking which decimal is bigger. So here we have 7, or 0.7, 0.7. It's in the very first place after the decimal, which means it's in the tenths. So this is the same as saying 7/10. And if I drew that as a picture, I'd have my whole block, I'd divide it into 7 pieces, and I'd color in 7 of them, 7/10. Now over here, I have 0.007. This 7 is in the third place, or it's in the thousandths. So this is the same as saying 7 thousandths. And if I drew a picture for that and I divided it into my thousandths, 7 thousandths would be like this tiny piddly little bit here, super, super tiny. So even though it has the word thousand in it, the tenths are the bigger one because it's divided into less pieces. So 0.7 is greater than 0.007. Let's move on to this one. We have 3.25. So we have 3, and then I have 2/10, and I have 5 hundredths. Now if we wanted, we could also write this as 3 and 25 hundredths. We could consider that whole thing hundredths instead of tenths and hundredths, but we're not going to worry about that today. We're just going to call it 3 and 2/10 and 5 hundredths. So that's like saying we have 3 wholes, and then we have 2/10, so we have our section divided into 10, we color in 2 of them, and then we have 5 hundredths, so we divide it into something fairly small, and we get like 5 hundredths like that. Good, so that's what that looks like. And then over here, I have 3 and 2 hundredths. Notice there's 0.10, so I don't have to write anything down about them. The second place is my hundredths, so 2 hundredths, and the third place is my thousandths, so 5 thousandths. Now if I was going to draw that one, I'd have 3 wholes, and then I have 2 hundredths, so I'd divide this into 100 pieces and color in 2 of them. And then I'd have 5 thousandths, so I'd divide it even tinier. And then I'd only get like 5 of those thousandths. So if I look at my fractions here, I will see that hundredths and thousands are going to be smaller than having tenths and hundredths, because tenths is divided into less spots, so they're each very, very big. So therefore, I can know that this one is the greater one, because it's tenths and hundredths, versus if you look at the tenths here, you have 0 tenths and you only have hundredths and thousandths. Another way that's really easy to make this comparison is just by looking at that tenths place. If we look at that tenths place, we will notice right away 2 is bigger than 0, so therefore that one has to be the bigger one. It has more tenths. Let's look at this one then. So I have 5, and it's in the first place, so and 2 tenths. And then I have 5 and 2 tenths and 5 hundredths. There we go. So I'm going to use my trick from the last one here. I'm going to look at the 2 in both of these, and if you look, oh, they're both the same in this case. So if they're both the same, I need to look at the next place. The next place says I have 0 hundredths, and this one says I have 5 100ths. Which one's going to be greater, the one with no other things or the one with 5 other hundredths? Well, it's got to be this one, so I can circle that one. And finally, I have 6.1 and 6.10. So this is known as 6 and 1/10, and this is known as 6 and 1/10. And do I really have to write 0 100ths if there's nothing there? Not really. I can just sort of leave it at that. So if I look at these two decimals, I will notice that actually neither one is bigger because they're the exact same thing. If you have 1/10 and no hundredths, that's the same as writing a 1 and a 0 or just writing a 1. So these ones are equal. Sometimes that happens as well. So there's just some thoughts on fractions and decimals grade 4s. We will be doing more with this later on, but that's sort of what it looks like. Goodbye.